Alrighty, good evening again. It is 6:45 and we're gonna go ahead and call to order the North Plains Budget Committee special session for tonight. I guess let's go ahead and all rise.
No,
No?
we already did that one.
All right.
We just
Hey,
have
I'm
to do the
really
roll.
patriotic, okay? Roll call then, Lori, please.
Okay, Commissioner Dumbrau,
Present.
Commissioner Page,
Here.
Commissioner Hagedorn. Here. Commissioner McCall Wallace. Here. Commissioner Pippin. Present. Commissioner Redding. Here. I don't see Commissioner Goodwin. Who's that?
Larry.
Okay, Larry. Okay, Chris Barron,
Present.
Lisa Fry's excused, Larry Gonzalez. Is that him just popping on?
Yeah. you just
Okay.
popped on.
David Hatcher,
Here.
Cindy Hurst. Here. Tom Murdoch,
Here.
Mark DeForge.
Here.
Okay, I think we are good to go.
Alrighty, first order of business is to, let's see. I guess we have to approve the special session agenda.
That's just the consent agenda. Aren't there
Alright.
minutes? There are minutes, there were
Perfect.
minutes added
Yes,
after the fact.
they were at
So
it.
that's part of the consent agenda.
Got it, okay. Let's go ahead and then the next order of business is to approve the minutes from the May 22nd, North Plains Budget Committee.
It's all on the consent agenda.
Oh, it
I'll make a
Oh,
motion,
perfect.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent
There you
agenda.
go.
There you go, thank you.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. All right, so that brings us to public comment. We did have some public comments submitted ahead of time as well. So that was all in our packets. Hopefully everyone had a chance to read that. That will be included in the minutes for this meeting, but we also had Don Weber in the audience submitted a card. Don, please join us and come share.
We have no place for dissent.
You can sit there, yeah. So Don, if you would please introduce yourself.
We get the lifesaver?
Yeah, introduce yourself. I know that you're a resident of North Plains, but do you live
Yes,
within the city boundaries or outside the city boundaries?
Don Weber, I am a resident of North Plains. Actually, I live in Sunset Ridge. And just a couple ideas I wanted to pass on in terms of the budget process. I've been out of town, or I wish I would have brought these sooner to be more timely, but in my career for 35 years, almost all of those years, one of my big responsibilities was to present yearly budgets. And at one point early in my career, a gentleman pulled me aside and he said, Don, I've got a couple ideas to give a little more credibility to this process. And that man was a certified public accountant. And he was nice about it, but he said, how do I know the numbers you're giving me are based on real numbers? I mean, you just typed them in. Yeah, I typed them in, but how do we know they correlate with the bank statements? I said, well, they do. He said, well, anyway, what he did was he offered to verify the opening balances. So he met with the bookkeeper and they matched up the bank statements and he verified it. And he said the advantage of doing that is it's outside eyes into the process. The bookkeepers initially were nervous, but eventually they liked it because it was somebody else saying, yeah, you did it correctly. But again, it was an outsider saying, yes, yes, yes. Part two of the process was, he said, I want to meet with the bookkeeper and just kind of verify your previous year fiscal year-end statements. We ran fiscal. So he said, I just want to make sure that those make sense. And a few times they had to change some things. But again, he met with our bookkeeper and basically just checked off that things have been done correctly. Both those things I think could be helpful for us. I think in the second part, for whatever reason, I'm not trying to make any kind of statement on it, but the state of Oregon requires auditors to look at financials. Our city has struggled to complete those for several years. I was reading a couple of years ago, the city council said, we've got these significant material weaknesses, those need to be cleaned up, implying that they'd be cleaned up in a number of months. 2 years later, we haven't quite finished it. A suggestion would be just to bring credibility to where we are now and those struggles of passing those audits would be to simply have the auditors, a representative of that firm of auditors, and then our public accountants that we use for the city just allow them to meet with this group and explain what's going on. I think that just brings fresh eyes. They're outside the city, are credible people. I think it would help people to understand what's the problem with us passing the audits. Anyway, those are my ideas. I don't think any of that needs to be slow down the budget process. I think it could be done off to the side by the end of June. I would defer, we have a certified public accountant here, Mark DeForge. I would defer if he says bad ideas, then skip it, because he knows more than I know on this. In theory, somebody like him could volunteer to be helpful in this process. In theory, if the accountant and the auditor can't come, somebody like him could talk to them, relay the information back. Anyway, I thought, thank you.
So thank you for coming down. Yeah, go for it. Always appreciate it. Do we have anyone, there's no one in the audience, is there anyone online that would like to offer public comment at this time? Second, just so everyone has the opportunity. All right, hearing none, this brings us to the meat of our meeting today. Mr. Bill, take it away.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, let me blast through some slides just to go over what's changed. Based on, or at the last meeting. Okay, budget committee, just thank you. One change here, so after this meeting, in order to meet newspaper notice requirements of council taking up the budget, June 16th will need to be the city council meeting, so that's no longer this coming Monday, that is June 16th on this calendar, so that's just an update there. Let me admit this person. Just kind of refreshing, these are the different city council budget priorities. We've gone over them in the budget, but just. Sorry,
Can you make the Zoom screen just one?
what was the trend?
Uh,
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
The numbers. Yeah,
yeah, thank you.
there we go. Thanks, Chris. So anyway, these are the priorities that, the budget was put together, trying to meet these targets as much as possible, these priorities as much as possible. For ones that are a bit more specific, I think in a number of places, the priorities were hit. I think the only budget priority that, because it's kind of more conceptual rather than more specific, is priority 8, a safe, affordable, resilient community. Public safety and investment is certainly in line with that, but that's a more of a hypothetical, broader one, so. It was one of the more challenging ones to kind of be very specific about hitting, but the rest of the priorities, for the most part, were straightforward material for making changes. This is all of the changes we discussed at the previous meeting a week ago, where there were comments made, but this budget item looks a little high. Is it an error? Yes, we changed it. And all of you, after going over all of those things, the committee members didn't get any comments of opposition or questions about making the changes, so I implemented all of those changes. So in the document that was sent to you, all of the different pertinent departments and funds are modified accordingly. So here comes the big remaining topic for this body. Police services costs and how to pay for it. And as you recall, at the end of the last meeting, there was really diversity of opinion about when and how much additional public safety costs should be taken on, and how to pay for it. The idea in the proposed budget, as released and proposed to you all for discussion. Proposed a hypothetical to be followed up with study and at a future, recommended for future adoption would be some kind of fee on the water bill. That was calculated in a preliminary rough order of magnitude way. To fund the cost of one more deputy than we currently have. We currently have 2 deputies. 2 full FTE deputies in the city of North Plains. From Washington County Sheriff's Office, and of course, we have 1 sergeant, that's the chief, who is here with us today. And 1 additional FTE deputy to make it 3 was proposed to start at the beginning of the new biennium, this July 1. And the full cost of that for 2 years with, of course, 7.5% escalation in cost between the years. And so that was the topic is that was of disagreement. Let's figure out how to modify or better pay for it, or come back with a recommendation to kind of address, kind of the differences of opinion that were heard that night. So I reviewed all the budget priorities, looked at different ways of cutting or moving things around. And what I landed on as a revised recommendation was simply, and this is all for you all to discuss and decide, was simply delaying the addition of an FTE deputy instead of this July 1, and therefore incurring the additional cost for 2 years, delaying it until July 1, 2026, halfway through the biennium, starting in the 2nd year of the biennium, and then assuming some unnamed, unspecified new revenue source would be studied and identified to fund the increase in cost as a result of that additional deputy. And that there would be a year for the city to figure out how to do that and implement a new funding source to help pay for that additional patrol officer, for that new deputy. And so that's really the change. There are a variety of things one could do with this budget to try to cut elsewhere to make this possible. And in review of the pillars and budget priorities, ranging from fiscal sustainability to good stewardship, to the other priorities that are mentioned, communication, services for residents, to cut elsewhere for this one priority didn't make sense to cut several other priorities depending on depending on what was cut. There's a program supervisor position that's part of this proposed budget that starts this July 1 as proposed in the budget. And that position actually is to cut that. I found to be more difficult than doing this for a couple of reasons. Number one, that position not only meets the new services for residents goal, but also that position, because it's so outward, as maybe I didn't go into it too much at the previous meeting, but that position is also going to be, because it's so outward facing in terms of the community and programs and dealing with Jesse Mays and other things, that person is actually going to be also, as part of the job scope, to be implementing the improved communications plan and posts and newsletters and things like that. They're going to be the one doing it rather than an outside consultant doing everything. So that position meets 2 or 3 different goal needs as opposed to primarily one. And then the other thing I guess I would say is as a supervisor who cut somebody's job to be fiscally sustainable and meet another goal, I felt this was a better way to go rather than try to cut even more somewhere else in ways that would make it fiscally more difficult for us to do certain things. When in trying to meet goals and priorities, I had to let somebody, this budget lets somebody go. So that's what I landed on, for better or worse, and you're welcome to disagree, with that. But, you know, it was a robust debate. I think giving this giving this a year, I can go to the I have some recommendations about how to do this in a moment, but that's where I landed. That's where I landed on all this. Finally. The only other change is that as a result of how things were, budgeting changes occurred for inter-fund transfers, particularly for finance and administration. There were some formula errors. And then looking at our existing standing reserve policy for the general fund, I have edited to move an additional $330,000 over the biennium, so about $165 a year, from the water fund to the general fund to alleviate the drop in reserves for the general fund to keep us from straying further from the unobligated reserves target in policy. We're still falling short, but that helps this. So there are changes to the general fund relative to the water fund that you'll see compared to the previous proposed budget. So a few things about cutting budget in North Plains. And I just want to go over a few things, and this leads into my recommendations. I've been looking at these at city numbers for a few years now, and we've gone through a local option levy process, flawed, imperfect, unsuccessful, however you want to label it, use a few of those words. But the bottom line is that, and I welcome having PSU's School of Public Service come in and take a look at everything and provide recommendations, or have OCCMA, however you want to bring somebody in to take a look at all that. LOC has whoever you like. The bottom line here is that North Plains has two big problems fiscally that have a long-term issue. Number one is that North Plains has since 1997, and on only one or two occasions has changed that temporarily. But it leans strictly on its permanent levy rate as a result of Measure 50 in 1997. Every city has a permanent rate, and they're all different. Some cities have a zero permanent rate, believe it or not, in the state, and they aren't even allowed to levy property taxes. They exist. It's bizarre, but it's true. But among the cities around us, all those blue lines up there, Gaston, Forest Grove, Hillsborough, Cornelius Banks, and North Plains, each of those blue lines are the city's permanent levy that it can always levy, whether or not voters approve a local option levy, a new local option temporary levy in addition to their permanent rate. North Plains, except for some rare instances a number of years ago, has strictly speaking had only a $2.17 permanent levy and nothing else. The next highest in the count in the area is Banks. And I point out here that North Plains is long operated with less than half of what Banks does, even Banks does with their local option levy, in addition to the permanent levy that they do have and they levy. Now, I say all this because I want to point out, cutting the budget doesn't change this. It can do good. There are things that can be done with cutting the budget to make things happen. But North Plains is a lean city because in terms of its service levels and what it spends on salaries and spends on staffing and spends on services, because for a very long time, it has really only levied this tax rate. So we're operating with a city that has long operated within a narrow confine of what it can do.
Can you just push that picture up so I can see the Gaston?
I would be happy to.
Thank you very much.
Gaston has a permanent rate of $6.61.
Thank you very much.
So again, I'm not here to tell you, I'm not here to advise that you go out and I'm not pushing for higher taxes necessarily. What I am making clear, though, is that you're working with a city that has long had to operate within really lean circumstances. And it is because of that, that over time, the water fund has had to kick in, cover the tab, what the property tax rate has not done for the city. So I just want, that's the first thing in terms of what I want to present about the city's fiscal standing and costs and why the water fund is.
Before you go on, is there any questions?
So Larry, Larry.
Larry,
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Of course, I had a question. Thank you for this hard work and putting this together, Bill, so I really appreciate it. My question is, well, it's kind of a statement first and a question. You know, we're, you know, with the full-time, you know, additional deputy, kind of borrowing money from the water fund, you know, all these things point to kind of revenue issues that the city is facing. The levy, of course, is one solution to that revenue issue. I'm wondering, I know that the city previously had considered urban growth boundary expansion in order to increase the revenue to the city. I'm just wondering, you know, timing wise, it seems like an urban growth boundary expansion would take longer to generate revenue than a levy would. Is that accurate?
Larry, yeah, thank you. That's accurate. So to be clear, whether this city had moved forward with some kind of urban growth boundary expansion, or we like, that's what was happening right now, or, you know, current circumstances, it's being discussed and we don't know what will happen. There was always going to be a gap where the city was largely built out and there would be some time before an expansion happened, if an expansion happened. So the city was always going to encounter this leveling off of growth, and all of a sudden, a fixed pool of people sharing the expenses and upkeep of infrastructure. So correct, a UGB expansion as part of changing the city's fiscal picture is what I would call a medium-term tool. But there was always going to be this gap, and the city was going to face what's more immediately next in terms of how it funds itself. There are two ways to, broadly speaking, make major changes, and I'll get to the second one here in a moment. So there's tax rates, and I think it just needs to be acknowledged that North Plains has long intentionally worked with a much lower property tax rate, but by choice, because there has not been a local option levy in many a moon, and there was one that was small many years ago, but it was only for police. Maybe 2000, 2001. So that was a surprise in looking at the record.
Before you move on, I have a question. With the additional FTE, this might be a question for Chief Jones. When does that contract have to be signed? And once it's signed, is that, hey, you've signed the contract, you've added this FTE, there's no looking back?
Well, typically the contract with the sheriff's office is done, renewed on an annual basis, starting with July.
Okay,
So that's typically how it's done. But
so,
there's flexibility, like if downrange, if we decide somewhere within the calendar year, hey, we now have the funding to add an FTE, that can always be adjusted mid-cycle if we need to. But generally speaking, annually, the new contract expects July.
so none of the biennium, but like, so if it was pushed out to July 1 of 2026, it would be July that you essentially would be renewing, or you would be approving that contract, or the city would be approving.
Yeah, exactly. Whenever the funding is, if the city feels in a position to be able to fund it,
It's a good piece of
we
information.
could adjust the contract and.
And it bills monthly.
But it bills monthly.
Yes.
Monthly. Okay, so the other thing, Larry, the second half of your question sort of here is the other issue. North Plains has two significant issues fiscally. Number one is long and currently operating with a very low tax rate by choice. And the other side of it is North Plains does not only stands out as having an exceptionally low tax rate, property tax rate. It also stands out as having one of the most imbalanced tax bases in Washington County. These are just our neighbors. The North Plains' tax base is approaching the worst in Washington County from the perspective of residential development in the city, taxable residential property versus taxable employment property, business property, okay? That's a big problem. The reason is because all of the property, business or residential, it all pays taxes the same way. It gets assessed by the county. It's subject to Measure 50, all those things. The issue though is that on a daily basis and at night, households are the ones much more on a daily basis using libraries, parks, calling the police after hours and using other city services. Okay? Businesses, on the other hand, now, I'm not saying businesses don't use our services. Employees might walk through the park and litter, or they're auto accidents, or businesses have lots, businesses have security issues. There's traffic during the daytime because of employees and things can happen. I'm not saying that businesses don't incur costs to a city, but relatively speaking, per employee, per number of people in a business versus households, businesses contribute far more net to revenues than they do to costs to a city, particularly like North Plains, because we don't provide nearly as many types of services as other cities do. So that's why an imbalance in the tax base is so problematic. We're relying on people, households overwhelmingly paying their taxes on their homes, but then they're the ones who are overwhelmingly using the services. And that's a problem under our current, on our tax system, Measure 50. So let me get that in a second. So we've done the math. How much do North Plains households per tax bill on average? How much do they generate in terms of, so the two bars I would just ask you to pay attention to or look at closely are the bars on the far right, the two on the right, okay? We did the math. North Plains per household, per home in North Plains, cost the city in terms of all the different services that we provide. About almost $1,900, $1,859. Okay, $1,859 annually per household. If you add up the revenue though to the city that each household, each home generates on average, that home between tax, property tax revenue, franchise fees that are paid on the phone bill, all those things, water bills, everything. That household only generates about $1,785. Now that's going to change year to year with inflation and everything. So, I mean, this is a fixed picture in time. But the reality is that much like any other city, business, taxable business investment and businesses buying water and businesses paying franchise fees on the power they use and the internet they use and all those things. Business is more, a certain amount of tax-based balance would pushes that in other cities, pushes that number from 1785 up to well over 1859. But because we have such a small business tax base here, it's overwhelmingly the residents paying the bill for everything, but also percentage-wise using much more of the services here. So this is the upshot. It doesn't matter how many homes you add to the city of North Plains. Each one of those homes certainly generates revenue in a variety of ways for the city, but on average, they use more, they cost the city more in terms of services than the revenue they generate, particularly with our very low property tax rate. So that's why the low property tax rate and the imbalanced tax base are such a problem. That's the imbalance. And so we've seen property taxes grow over the last few years. Well, that's true. Every house is paying more into city taxes, but the costs to serve them goes up more. And that's why we're seeing the water fund over time paying more and more for the general fund. Now, we're not going to solve the world's problems tonight. I just want to bring all this to your attention because that generally speaking frames why I'm recommending what I'm doing. And so here's my more detailed recommendation and you all can discuss it. My recommendation to you all is to approve the biennial budget that I've proposed here with the changes that I've talked about. But I would recommend, kind of like as Cindy and I seemingly spontaneously at the same time at the last meeting, had the same idea of pinning to the budget approval some strong recommendations to council to address some things that come with this budget. And you can do that. But number one is just acknowledge that the long dependence on the water fund to supplement a very low tax rate. And the tax base imbalance, frankly, that needs to stop because you only have 2 years to fix this problem. After 2 years, we're talking dramatic cuts. I'm talking departments go on. Because there's nothing else left to tap after 2 years. The second thing, I'm recommending that the FTE deputy be added halfway through the biennium for the second year only. Use the next year to figure out a revenue stream of some kind. People feel differently about taxes and revenues. I get it and I respect that. But this is a city long lean on revenue, and the city doesn't have a cost problem. The city has a resource issue, as evidenced by the fact that we only have 3 FTE police officers, 3, but they take up over 50% of our general fund money. 3 officers take up over 50% of this city's general fund unrestricted revenues. And that's because our revenues are so small, not because we spend a lot. If we had 8 deputies going around and you all looked at the numbers and saw deficits and said, we gotta cut, we'd know where to cut, but honestly, 3 deputies are taken up. And this is not a criticism of the service of Washington County Sheriff's Office. We just have a lean revenue stream. It's very limited.
Commissioner Hackador?
Oh, the Zoom is Zoom.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, there, every slide changes and there's no like great place, so it's,
Sorry.
no. It's quite all right.
Hey, can you move the?
close
Words
caption.
too, I'm more than happy to move that too.
I like closed caption.
Thank you.
Let's move
yeah,
those, yeah.
Sorry.
We've already gone over recommendation. The third thing is, I'm gonna, the last time the city did a vision, even a strategic, like a full strategic vision, it's been 10 years. And I would recommend to this body to recommend the city council to take up some kind of fiscal strategy with it to change the equation for the city. It's going to, you have 2 years, you have 1 year to figure out the police issue in this budget. You have 2 years, really no more to figure out the fiscal situation with the city. And then finally, this isn't necessarily a city council recommendation, but I would, as a budget committee, revisit all of this in no less than a year. I say in a year simply because in 1 year's time, we'll have, well, before that, but in 1 year's time, we'll have a way better specific idea about the changes in the funding structure and equation for Washington County cooperative, I have community, sorry, cooperative library system, WCCLS. And in about a year's time, we'll know way more. We'll have a far better idea about how much above our conservative revenue estimate for the change might be. And what picture there is for how that funding shift might affect how the other departments might see city resources because the county's kicking in more for the library. We're budgeting for that in this budget, but we're doing it very conservatively. But I would just recommend you all return to this no later than next year, for both of those reasons. So that's my recommendation to you all.
Perfect. I'll go ahead and I'll start with some comments. So the first thing, I just want to remind everyone, let's please not get into policy tonight. I know we have our elected officials here. I will leave that to you guys and your city council team. And the second thing I want to remind everyone is the budget, when we move it forward and approve it, we're approving the authorization to spend, not the requirement to spend, which is why I asked that question when the contract needs to be signed. And so it is not a, you must spend this money, it is you are authorized to spend this money. So there is a potential to reconvene next year, and sadly, crush Bill's hopes and dreams. It's not Bill's hopes and dreams, it's actually from the city council priorities. To crush those hopes and dreams of adding that FTE if we do not find a funding source. But that funding source has to be put back on city council. That does not need to be decided here. That shouldn't even be discussed here. That's not gonna be this body's decision. That needs to go back to council. So what my recommendation would be, And I'm just gonna, my recommendation would be to adopt the budget as proposed with the FTE of next year, with the added that city council has the, essentially that wording of a revenue source has to be identified. It should not be called out that it's the water fund. It should not be called out that it's a local option levy. It should be suggested that our elected officials find a revenue source and identify a solution to the budget issues, the revenue issues we have as a city.
Why do you put in the recommendations? I like it, so we have more discussion, but like that one.
Commissioner,
Hand is up.
Cindy had her.
City.
Okay, before we go into this, I have a specific question to ask, and I'm hoping you can answer it. We beamed a little bit on this because I've got almost the same thing written here, so. But, I need to go back. I've looked at this and looked at it and thought about it. I need to go back to the Parks and Rec department.
Okay.
Okay, so I read the narrative, I remember what you said about hiring the new person, okay? And then tonight you said that that person, the parks, I don't know what you're gonna call it, but anyway, the parks person will also be doing some administrative work,
Communications.
communications. So has that portion of their salary been included in the administrative fund? Or is that whole salary that's here? And I'm seeing two pieces of it.
Yeah.
All right, I'm seeing 251,000 in the Parks and Rec. And then I'm also seeing 38,500 in the Jesse Mays Hall. Okay, so that we're talking $290,000 for a person. However, the FTE that you've got for the Parks and Rec is 1.1, because I realize there's other people in the city who do work for Parks and Rec. Okay. And you've got 1.2 in the Jesse Mays. So even if you back out that 0.1 and 0.2, you're still talking a hell of a lot of money in 2 years for one position. And they're not doing all parks. Okay,
Great question.
so my question really is, how much is gonna come out of this parks fund for that new person? And why are we not putting the other over into finance and administration if you plan to do it that way?
So, my recollection is that 80% of that person's personnel cost is in Parks and Rec, and 20%. I believe 10% is Jesse Mays and 10% is finance and administration.
Okay.
Now, the cost that you're seeing that goes over and above over the 2-year period, there's a little bit of Dustin.
Mhm.
In that his personal expense, there's a little bit of mine
Okay,
in there.
Mhm.
And who else is in there that touches on personal?
well, I thought probably one of the,
There's.
the receptionist or something like that.
There's 4 or 5
Yeah.
people, like Dustin, me, are like 5 or 10%. Like, it's
Yeah.
a small part of
Right.
ours.
Okay.
I think there still is a Parks and Rec, not maintenance, but we have somebody over in, Public Works that part of their salary, there's part of their personal expenses in Parks and Rec too. So it's a combination of.
Okay,
few
that's
people.
what I assumed.
That's what it is.
But when I go back and look at finance and administration, I wasn't seeing it there.
That's basically, I mean,
Because you have a lump sum.
Mhm.
Okay, so that explains that to me.
Mhm.
I am still concerned about hiring a new person for Parks and Rec
Mhm.
programming when our major priority is the police department, and I don't care what year we put a policeman in. I still have trouble with this. The other piece that I have trouble with is North Plains is a community that has always sought out volunteers. And if we really, really, really need to have somebody start doing some parks programming, maybe we can start out on a volunteer basis. Maybe there's somebody in the community that would raise their hand and say, I'll do it for 6 months, let's see how it goes. Before we spend the money that's needed in the police department. That's my thinking.
Commissioner Calls.
Thanks. I want to say that, based on the conversation in the last meeting, it's a lot of food for thought. And, which left me sort of researching, thinking, looking at things. And I'm going to try very hard not to tip the edge to policy.
Thank you.
However, the North, was clearly presented us tonight that, North Plains is a lean city, and that is by community choice. And I think that's an important thing to remember. That the new position of which we're talking about in terms of covering communications, doing some other sort of administration stuff, as well as beginning parks programming, does not eliminate the need for volunteers, or I'm sorry, Jesse Mays, sort of leveraging, it's a small, I think incremental really, but sustainable step to move towards having a Parks and Rec program down the line, much further down the line. I really see it as that instrumental step. In terms of the police, I did look at the stats. There's not a lot of changes over the last 5 years, a couple that are clearly COVID related. And we are on target this year to really land in exactly the same place. And so I think that is also important. I listened to comments about Facebook last time. We did hear a comment that was read to us, and that I had also seen on Facebook. I went back and researched for the last 6 months on the North Plains community page and the North Plains communities and families, and something like that, and 2 pretty active pages. And, you know, there was nothing in the last 6 months asking specifically for more police coverage. Now, they are talking about incidents, but they are not asking for specific coverage. And so I feel that based on the information that we have and it's presented to us, that we could add a police officer at any time we find funding. We could decide in October that we're going to charge a fee to everybody, which we ruled out last time, but we could do it. So that's available to us. We could find funding and revisit a contract at any time to increase that. And in looking at the relationship to other cities, you could see who's funded with additional levies and additional funding sources that we don't have, that are supporting their police and services, or are supporting other areas so they can support their police. My recommendation, I am concerned about having a line in there that's an open line of $200,000 this year and $4,400 for the next budget plus, that there's this idea that it's something that we are actually doing and sustaining. And I think that my recommendation would be that we simply do nothing in terms of that. Not to say that it's not valuable and that we are going to get there. This community hasn't fully gotten to that place yet, based on all the other information. But that we do nothing in terms of adding the police piece, and we make the recommendation that it could be added and should be added when additional funding is found, but not that it's a line in the budget.
No, but I have a completely different question, probably more of a comment. When it comes to FTE expense, that's not just salaries, that is salaries, benefits. Yeah, PERS, all the above.
Salaries, benefits, PERS, all of that.
Thank you.
Exactly.
And that's what I was referring to as total.
Okay, perfect. Just wanted to make sure.
If I might, that actually raises another point about how we fund things. We live in a state with PERS. This year, we have to pay 31% rate of salary for PERS. That's up from 26 or 7 last year. The legislature controls that. We have no control over it. And frankly, we could have made. When I started working through this budget, I didn't have our local 6% share of that in the numbers I was working off of, and I was starting down the road of, oh wow, yeah, we can actually we can actually really afford this person and put some money into this and then it was, you know, brought to my attention to double check the PERS rate because it jumped up so much this year for the new biennium. And it basically forced me to go through and cut things I had gone down the path of doing because PERS is just, it's a huge chunk of change that is included in that personnel expense. That's why it's labeled personnel expense, because it includes everything else.
Yeah.
Got it.
And PERS is absolutely in there, and that's another thing that's out of our control. And that out of our control in terms of costs going up. And that's something important to mention about police services. We get a heck of a contract, all inclusive, everything we need in the contract with Washington County Sheriff's Office. They do a great job. But the reality is that when we sign on to any expansion of their contract to serve us, we sign on to costs that regularly out of our control go up 7 to 8%. When we as a city are constricted with Measure 50 and your tax bill only being able to go up 3%, unless you build a deck that can be assessed, you know, for additional tax or add a bedroom. But by and large, when you add a police officer with Washington County Sheriff's Office, you're signing on to a guaranteed shortfall between what we're able to increase our, you know, with what property taxes can go up in this city without a additional levy, you know, under Measure 50, and what just the costs of that service is for public safety from Washington County Sheriff's Office. So you're signing on to the guaranteed need to figure out funding by adding anything with them. I mean, it's assured that you need to do that.
I'll just, if I can, just throw a couple 2 cents out there. Obviously, you know, I'm where I stand and what I feel is important, right? So, it's hard to justify based off, you know, the need to increase with just purely numbers. And so if anybody wants to have conversations, want some real examples of why it's important, or why this city is really being underserviced by police right now at our current service level, I'm happy to provide those examples. It's hard to obviously give those to you in a numerical fashion, but we've been at the same staffing level for police for a very long time, and the city has grown since then dramatically. And so funding obviously is critical. We can't pay for it, we can't have it, but at the same time, there is an absolute need for more police service in the city.
Chair Braun,
Go for it.
thank you. So a couple of questions to follow up on Commissioner Hurst's comments and questions. So number one, you said they're going to be doing some communications. So is this going to be in addition to current communications, or is in replacement of current communications?
Great question, Commissioner Dumbrau. So this person would take on probably 80% or so or more of what we currently contract out. And then because they would be internal and on our dime, the scope of what this person does could be more. That would be the plan. And then what we would do is retain somebody independent for, you know, messaging advice, press releases, working media to show up to this and that, cover this and that, which our current consultant does. But the reality is, just getting in the history of this, the reality is that the first consultant that we had for a few years doing this, she left the city of Hillsborough to be an independent consultant, and she did everything for us well, but she had a life situation where she could for the amount she charged us, and she really didn't have any other clients. So we kind of had like this virtual staff person for cheap doing everything. We will never find a person like that again. Our current consultant is more like a typical consultant in that she has a variety of clients, has to balance time. If there's emergency tree fall, we got to get social media out about it, or there's a scam text being sent out. You know, Therese, our consultant, is all over it as soon as she can be. But, you know, having a staff person doing this stuff, and them, you know, being able to kind of have them get to it sooner and not have to juggle other clients, that sort of thing, is the idea here. So it lets us enhance how we're communicating with the public by having some internal.
So the question, I guess, then is there cost savings here, or is this, we're just getting additional service is what I'm trying to get to?
There's cost saving. The cost of outside consultant contract goes down in the budget in part to pay for this position.
But you said the head count is 80% funded in parks, so then it's not 100% dedicated to parks.
No, correct. Yeah, because the person's gonna, well, and there's a bit of Jesse Mays in there too. But in the budget, I have this position charged mostly to parks. But then, because one other thing we're gonna be doing is that our assistant planner is gonna take over updating and improving the website. And so there is some coordination between that person repurposed in their job position and this person being added. But yeah, this person would be involved with coming up with a new programming plan, parks programming plan, going out and finding the volunteers to get involved. I think that's kind of one response to you, Cindy, is that this person would be going out and like getting the volunteers to teach yoga, find the experts in the community, get them involved, start scheduling them in Jesse Mays, supporting them, figuring out budget, figuring out fees, all that nobody right now has time to do unless we bring someone new on. But
So,
you go ahead, I'm sorry.
oh, go ahead, sorry. Go ahead and finish your thought, and then I have another, have a follow-up.
But to get to your original question, there is a reduction in the budget for outside consulting on communication. And that cost difference is part of what goes into paying for this position. Through finance and administration, basically.
Right, so then the other follow-up question to Commissioner Hurst's point is, why then are we, so that's great that it's not gonna be quite as much net, but the challenge is, and I think Commissioner Hurst hit it right on the head, is why are we funding this position but not the police position when the police position is the priority? And not to get into the policy piece, but again, if we're picking one and the city is currently, the residents of the city have made a choice that they don't want higher taxes or don't want to pay fees, then public safety should come before parks, in my opinion. As much as we love parks, public safety is more of a critical service based on what we see. And so I think that's something that I would advise that we consider based on this is, which one gets funding priority? Because why can't we reverse that and put this position out into the second year with a need for a funding source and the police in the first year? So, or something of that nature. So that would be my input on the whole thing. And I'll turn it over to Larry Gonzalez.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, and to follow up, Aaron, that was my question is, for the purpose of this meeting, if we approve this budget and send it with our recommendations to City Council, are they committed? Would they be committed to each line item? In other words, if they feel that as previously stated, we really need the police that are a priority, so let's move that money that we had allocated on this budget we're approving from the Parks and Rec down to police, and then the additional funding source, when we find it, we'll put the Parks and Rec position back in. In other words, are they committed? Are we committing the City Council to each line item, or are we just looking at the bottom and saying you can spend this much?
Larry, my answer to that is that you all are authorizing the total amount of money over a 2-year period to spend. When council decides, I mean, frankly, the way the budget works, it's a biennial budget. I've proposed a budget for one FTE law enforcement deputy. I'm calling it the second year of the biennium, but it's a biennial budget. So you could have half of an FTE for the whole 2 years. You could have the FTE only in the first year and then and the additional deputy the second year, you can spread this cost however you want over a 2-year period. As it is with this program supervisor position. The budget for that one is over a 2-year period. So you would be approving a budget that enables the spending on the position for a 2-year period. But when it actually happens, like for instance, I could go out right now to advertise for the job if this were adopted by council in June. I won't hire this person until after school starts. And then when they start would be in October. And so we're already talking about a third of a fiscal year gone before I'm even spending the money authorized for even a full 2-year period. So keep that in mind. The timing of when the money actually goes out the door versus you're authorizing a money for a full 2-year period, but how that gets implemented is a bit of a different thing.
Commissioner McCall.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
But I just wanted to share that, the League of Oregon City and the basic budget committee official duties and what the budget committee doesn't do. It does say that we don't set staffing levels, salaries, benefits, or contract terms, nor do we decide whether or not the service or program should be provided. So, you know, that is part of what's happening in this discussion, I feel like.
Yep.
But I also want to say that, Bill was given 8 priorities. And from those 8 priorities to create a budget, which he has done for us. And I don't think that there was anything that council said, you know, this is our one priority. It is listed at the top. And we did not vote on priorities of, we didn't rank the priorities in terms of 1 to 8. They're listed that way, however.
That was misleading.
We did not rank them as a council. Am I correct, council?
I understand.
Thank you. So I think we're kind of delving into a couple different things. You know, the question is, are we approving that the money be spent this way based on the recommendations that the budget person, which is Bill in this case, has given us?
Thank you.
I have one more thing that I want to say.
One last.
I do support, like I said, Bill, you and I are thinking, to the 3 items that he has on here. 1, 2, and 3. I support those wholeheartedly when it comes to this budget. But our task is to approve the expenditures, the budget. And I can't support this budget with an expenditure for a new position or salaries, 80% at Jesse Mays for a parks program person, and still keep the police department neutral or the same. I can't support this. So everything else is great, but that's the one thing I can't go to my neighbor and say, guess what? We're gonna hire a new parks person, but our police department's gonna be the same as it was for the next 2 years. I can't do that.
I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Commissioner Fish, you had your hand raised.
Is it the total budget they were working with? Can the city council, I'm talking about policy now, sorry. But can the city council move things around as long as the whole budget stays the same, or does it have to be 10%? 10%?
There's a percentage once it goes over.
5%.
5, like, yeah.
After that, the budget committee has to come back into the issue.
So so if we go from parks to police, we change that over. You can't do that, even though it's the same dollar amount. They move around
Up to 5%.
for each line item. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's really meant to. I mean, yeah, the system, the Oregon budget law is set up to be skeptical of elected leaders and budget. That's why you have 7 at-large residents.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's pretty,
Right.
yeah.
Commissioner McCall, will you please go over what it said again?
It says, the commission official duties are to review the proposed budget document, allow the public to ask questions and comment on the budget, approve the budget with all funds in balance, and approve the maximum amount of property taxes. The budget committee does not set staffing levels, salaries, benefits, or contract terms, decide whether or not a service or program should be provided, or make policy.
Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you. Had a lot of discussion. Bill has done a lot of work. Is there any other discussion on the floor?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
So, Bill, can you tell us why, you made this choice and what that priority is? Because you made a choice to do this and, you know, I have my own opinions about communication in the city, but, but can you please, you know, I know this was not an easy choice.
Yep.
All the way around, that, you know, it is a lean, again, North Plains has chosen to have a lean budget. That's their choice.
So. So on the topic of priorities, I think it's a very popular priority to have public safety and increase it, sooner rather than later. And I won't deny that. I guess the issue is that, part of why I structured it with the parks communication person and delaying the public safety officer is that from just a day-to-day, month-to-month communications and just doing things for the community, where's this, where's that, you know, we hear from Parks Board. You know, it's a priority to add services. I think we kind of had some friction over the old city hall, you know, according to longstanding facility space need. You know, that was going to go to the library because they were the last department, you know, service of the city to see any expansion of space need. And I think there was some friction over the idea that they were going to be getting it versus having classes and programs and things. So there is a very, you know, there's a very strong element of programming for the community being needed. As well as, I just, on the communication side of things, I mean, this, nothing against Therese, but having somebody that is day-to-day doing communications and working on improving things with expert messaging and how to handle certain situations and press releases and things. But the city doing the communications implementation stuff itself would get us a lot further in the type of communication we need with the community. But as far as cutting things, you know, the communications parks person hits a few different priorities. The police officer, it's primarily that one. And I might add an answer to the question of Councilor Dumbrow or Commissioner Dumbrow. The cutting of the planning manager position, there are some savings there that are applied to this, specifically to this parks and communication position. And so I'm basically just trying to maximize with my recommendation here, hitting the most priorities and sacrificing the least by making changes. That's really, it's just a maximize, minimize exercise. And just, I agree, our communication with the community can be better, and that's part of this too.
Absolutely.
Can I just wrap it up with my?
Yeah, please.
So with that, based on that information, I would go with the recommendation. I know I said I didn't want to see that on a budget line item, but if it puts it on council to figure out how to pay for that, which was really puts it on the community
Yes.
to figure out how to pay for that. Does the community want a levy? Are we at the point now that makes sense? Does the community want a fee? Does that make sense? You know, I am at that, you know, at the point to be able to do that. Because I don't think the other one still leaves us short, it leaves us halfway short.
Commissioner Paper, you had your hand? I see you all.
Thank you. You know, I just want to say thank you to Bill. I know that the budget is a huge lift in general, let alone when you're doing the role of a city manager and finance director. So I just want to say thank you, and thank you to the department heads as well and staff, because I know that you're watching a tennis match of back and forth. And thank you to everyone for being here tonight, because I know we all have the community's best interest at heart, and these are some really hard decisions. My question for Bill, and I was just going back through, kind of reading through the overview, but part of that parks position was also planning, right? So there's also planning, so I'm thinking about, like, question comes through for code. Who would that go to?
Oh, sorry, no, I get, maybe I misspoke, some of the money saved from eliminating the planning manager position. Some of that is what's helping pay for the program supervisor, parks communication. But in terms of planning and code and things like that, we would be returning to. So Rowan, the assistant planner position, Rowan would handle things. But there is budget in there, and we would return to relying upon a consultant planner for the really expert stuff. And that's how North Plains did things for a very long time. The assistant planner position remains because of being able to do those things. I mean, Rowan's handily done the FEMA pickling process with the city attorney and the feds and other cities coordinating on all that. But the other thing is that the other priority, economic development with an emphasis on smaller businesses. And then all of the urban renewal agency sunset date extension and plan amendments and maybe boundary changes and all those things. In downtown business association, that's Rowan. So we would be Rowan in planning, but we would be returning to relying on a consulting planner for, and then, working with Rowan on those things to kind of rub off on with skills and knowledge and that's what.
Thank you. I think, just to kind of throw out where my head is at, before we even had tonight's meeting, for many years, my concern has been long-term sustainability in our city. And the writing has been on the wall, and it is, unfortunately, we are coming to that point now where we are in a very critical situation of what will the next 2 years look like after this? Like, we might be able to approve a budget and shift some things around and make it work, but what about after this biennium? And, I shared this during a previous council meeting that, I don't want to bring in new services, but we have to take them away at the next budget because we are stagnant and there's nothing happening. We're not able to fund this. So, again, I don't want to get into the policy side of this, but I would just really encourage this body to think about whatever we do this biennium, can we do that the next biennium and thereafter in current state? If we were to stay exactly the same, and if not, please come to city council meetings, because I'd also love to hear your input on how to think outside the box, because there are some really hard choices that will need to be made.
Commissioner.
Michelle, thank you very much for reading what you did with the League of Oregon Cities. Okay, so I would say to myself, I'm gonna backtrack. I will support this budget with this information that we have up there, 1, 2, and 3. But I can promise the city council that I will be there testifying to pull the funds for that line item. Okay, so that's kind of where I am right now.
And put this back here.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you said.
No, I
you know,
understand. No, thank you.
It's, that's not our job.
No, that's the process.
It's to do not to do the line item,
Right.
but also. I had the impression that the priorities that were put up here were put up in order. Okay, that's been my impression all along. And police is right up the top. Therefore, police is right up at top. And that's the way I've been thinking. So.
You've got a hand over here too.
Oh, I have lots of comments and thoughts, but
Go for it.
I'll try to go down the middle with what I'm thinking, and this kind of will lead into a little bit about decisions that's gonna come up with council. One, I haven't heard a whole lot of, I'm kind of. Needs to come out, I have not heard a whole lot of people come up and say, or have any comments about what we're going to fund and how we're going to fund it, or anything about the budget. I'm not sure if that's gonna change before June 16th. So, which is kind of disheartening that we're making recommendations and we're saying that people are gonna do something and nobody's speaking up. But with that, since I've been in this town for about 10 years now, the makeup of this town has significantly changed. And even from 2 years ago, we tried to do the last vote to add something to the levy, we significantly changed. So we can't say that it's gonna continue down that path that it's been for years without council giving them the option or seeing if they give the option to do it. If we truly feel that another FTE police officer is what the city needs, then we'll all pony up and pay for it. I think we're looking at the police, the FTE police wrong by looking at number of calls, and we should be looking at how many officers per capita. Is a recommendation, because I want to say, I thought even like the FBI was like 2.44 per thousand residents or something, which I think that's a little excessive, but
It's one per thousand.
yeah, so looking at the number of, instead of calls, basing it off of how much demand is out there on how many should we have for the number of residents in the town. And I think if we're going to, no matter what, if we're gonna move forward and the town is gonna grow, whether it's just an economic growth that we do, which is probably more needed, probably easier to come by instead of housing. We're gonna need something like this program manager or program supervisor to come in and step in and be the voice out there to try to help rally everything together and be the person. And it's, to me, it's something, it's a stepping stone into a bigger city, into a bigger community.
Thank you. Dustin?
I think to follow on that, that's kind of what. Bill, please stop me if I overstep my bounds in any of this. Sometimes the city has a communication issue. Right now, the library has a really good online presence. Public Works does not have a good online presence. It's just me, whenever I can, have Therese put things out there. She doesn't always put things out there in a timely manner. And it even comes like some items that are emergencies. It doesn't always happen, or they don't always get out the way that I want it. And that's just the matter of, how it works. And that kind of goes along with communication, and, we're trying to make our city look good and communicate and be transparent with everybody. And the more that we do that, the more we can basically improve services to the city. There is another point I was gonna make about, I think we're getting stuck on calling it a parks position. That just happens to be where that position falls. I think Bill had called it a program supervisor, or program coordinator, one of those. Program is kind of a generic thing. Yes, they will be doing different parks coordination and communication, volunteer, reach out, everything like that. But part of the program is messaging all these different things. And that could include with police and getting the message out that we need, to do something about our budget and kind of message all this. And I think that's the key point to take away from this position. It's not a parks position, it's a program coordinator position that's kind of generic. It's like, I'm not just a public works director. I am wearing a million different hats. This person would also be wearing a different hat. It's kind of falls along with the lean mentality that we have here in North Plains, is that we are doing a lot of different things. And so let's not just say it's a park position, but it is more of a communications outreach community position more than anything. And I think messaging is something that this city really needs a lot of help with in the meantime. And maybe that might, help us with getting all the services aligned with the community population level and whatnot.
Thank you, Dustin. Commissioner Morgan?
Oh, why don't you go ahead, David?
Oh, Dave, I'm sorry, I didn't see. I don't see all.
I'll go with one thing first before I go into communication part that I want to talk about. North Plains is, when you mentioned about a levy for police, but when North Plains has never passed a levy. What we had back then was cops. Cops help finance a short-term police officer.
Oh, okay. I
Okay,
misread it then.
Yeah.
It was like early 2000s though.
Yeah,
something like
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. I got the date right. I just didn't get the details.
yeah. They're trying to help small communities with police coverage, and that was a short-time thing, and we struggled afterwards. Oh, how can we continue paying for the extra police? This is when we had our own police force. Okay, communication. Back when I was mayor, city council, and I'm sure Cindy will attest to this. It's been frustrating and communicating to the community what was going on. There was no mechanism. People were blaming us for stuff that, where did this come from? Because they didn't know. And often we took heat for stuff for no reason. The population has changed. So having someone in that position, I go, wow, finally, and the new council says they want communication. Well, here you go, and Bill's giving you an opportunity for that. It's important, it's, we haven't had it. The last thing is, the population for when, I served, and I'm sure Cindy, and when Cindy served, is different today. The people in the community are a different kind of people. And with that, I mean, there's gonna be, in the past, there's no way in hell any kind of bond levy is ever gonna pass in the city. No way. I don't know if that is true today. I really don't. And maybe with a communication director that word can get out to the population. And going with the bond levy, I really don't know if it would pass. I do have a really strong feeling that, we're not gonna be sustainable without a bond levy. I don't see any other way of funds. Of us getting funds other than a bond levy, so it's kind of a catch-22 the way I see it. I think that's all I have to say.
Good.
So I agree with all that, and what we have here looks great. I asked earlier, not that it's gonna matter for this one. But we have a lot of people that are outside the city that are using our services and influencing how we do our business. I wanna do like a parks thing. Is that something we could do for next, would that fall in budget, like a parks district, or is that? Doesn't pertain to this, I'm just very curious. Like a parks district to help pay for this kind of stuff, because they use a lot of parks and they wanna run the city, but they don't pay anything to our.
So it's possible. So let me raise. There's a whole kind of study process, legal process we would have to kind of pay for incrementally based on each step being successful. So that would be something that we would pay for out of the budget in professional services. And it would probably be, it'd be 422 Boards and Commissions Department or general, or the Finance Administration Department, but yeah, that would be hiring consultants.
Additional funding you get for going forward, right?
Yeah, right, but a parks district could be studied. For feasibility to see where it might be, how the line might be drawn beyond the city of North Plains. And what residents would be in the district that might use, there'd be some polling, who might find out who's using the parks that don't live in the city. Interest in helping to pay, all that fun stuff, but that could happen, and then there's a process to do it. I will also point out that one thing that, as part of the funding study for public safety, is that Washington County Sheriff's Office does do an enhanced patrol district. That's what Bethany is. It's not a city. There is a boundary where there is an enhanced Washington County Sheriff's Office. Aloha may I have it, I don't know, but Bethany does. I drive by the station all the time. Picking up the kid, but
Hopefully not from the police station.
no. No, probably usually one of the little restaurants right here, hanging with friends after school, if that's, but either way. An enhanced service district is a possibility, and that could be something that also could stretch beyond just the city of North Plains. Because I think what the chief would say is, it's a minority of our incident calls. But there is an element of calls that our police department gets that are outside the city limits. And by having dedicated people here, doesn't mean they're primarily answering calls and helping people outside the city, but having dedicated people here supports the public safety service to the broader area around North Plains. So that's something to consider too.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, my brain is wandering.
No, you're okay. I'm gonna go ahead and rein us in. We're getting past the point of budget. We're starting to go into
Yeah.
policy, which tells me it's probably time to rein it in a little bit. Commissioner Hurst, you have budget related?
No, I don't have a comment. I'm going to move that we approve the fiscal year 2025-27 biennial budget with the following emphasized recommendations to city council. I'm not gonna read them. 1, 2, 3, and 4, but I'm gonna add a fifth. And that is, and this is something that I said 2 years ago, and I think it was kind of glossed over. And that was anytime there is a budget supplement, review, change, that the budget committee at least be notified when it goes before the city council. Because many times the city council reviewed a budget thing and I just kind of heard about it and then went back in to take a look and see what was going on. Because 2 years is a long time. And unless we know what's happened in those 2 years, it's hard to catch up. So that's going to be my fifth one.
Yes.
And the last thing is that we approve the property tax rate that is proposed.
$2.17 per thousand.
Right.
Best value.
Motions or just one?
It's
One
one
motion.
motion.
One motion, it's a big one, so sorry.
So we have a motion on the floor to adopt or to approve the budget, not adopt, approve the budget with the recommended message to city council with the addition of the fifth message and the property tax rate, which is 2.17.
It's, yeah, 2.1712 per thousand assessed value.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. Is there any discussion on the floor? We've had quite a bit. All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the budget is approved. And with that, that's our last order of business.
But I will promise the city council, you're gonna see.
This meeting is adjourned at 8:07. Thank you, everyone, for all your time.
It's just show.
Stop it.
Down to the pretty version.
You know, when I was mayor,
I didn't hear you over.
when I was mayor. $5.